And because we don't have a chair at this point, I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 9:04. And we can move right to item 2, which is consideration of the December 1st, 2021 meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Wes.
Sure.
You have more copies?
I do have a couple. Because I wasn't sure, yes.
Well,
This is one of the only times I'll be doing this right now.
oh, okay.
I'm a paper. I'm
I
not.
brought-
a paper
I brought
person. Janet, do you? Okay, all right.
Readers are not parts, so it's kind of useful.
And then included in the packet were February 24th, 2022 meeting notes that require no action, but were placed in there for your review purposes. And then that brings us to item 4, which is the annual election of the CDA chair and vice chair. As I'm sure you read in the memo, this occurs annually with the CDA. And so right now, anyone who would have a desire to be the chair or vice chair, but I think we should compartmentalize it. So if we could work with chair first and then move on to vice chair, we would then have people put their names on the table and then we'll take a vote.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, not it.
So now we know where Joe stands. There's still vice chair, Joe.
1, 2, 3, not it.
I want to put my name in for chair and Joe for vice chair.
1, 2, 3, not it.
I would have interest in vice chair.
Wesley, you want to get more involved?
Yeah.
No, it seems like this
Like, no.
that proposal sounds good. From what I could hear, that proposal sounded good to me.
Okay,
But Jessica's also interested in vice chair.
Yeah,
Leslie.
Jessica
Oh.
said vice chair too.
yep. So,
Oh.
And Joe said he doesn't want vice chair, so he's out.
Yeah, I'm out.
okay. So process of elimination. So Joe, would that be your motion to recommend John Kraus as chair and Jessica Carpenter as vice chair?
Oh,
No.
Yeah,
No,
Or-
I decided I wanted
Okay.
to. So,
good. I would nominate John Kraus and Jessica for chair and vice chair.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
that starts next week, right?
Actually, for the next item. I will help you. I will help you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Motion carries.
Thank you, you two.
Thank you.
That's a lot of work and responsibility.
Don't thank me yet.
Well, got big shoes to fill. I was always shocked at how much Peter did.
Yeah.
Where is he, by the way? I thought he was
You know what? He emailed this morning. He was unable to make it because he had a.
too emotional.
He doesn't need donuts.
You would laugh, but I still talk to Peter a lot. He's been great, but no, he had a client meeting that got changed on him this morning. But if you would like a donut in his honor, right at the end, and there's some paper towel along the side.
And Arthur's absent.
Correct. And noted as such.
That's right.
So we are moving on to item 5.
How long did they just get elected for?
4 years.
4 years?
So the
Well,
the
actually,
chair and
no.
the vice chair occur annually,
Okay.
every year
Yeah.
occurs. So,
The commissioners are 4 years, but I
and
don't know
some
where I'm
staggered
at in
terms.
my term.
You're due up, I think.
You know?
I don't know your specific year, but I know that you are good for this next year because we do a
Right.
review of all.
Yeah,
committee
I
members
thought it
all the
was
time.
like 2 or 3 on that.
Okay. I'd be happy to refresh all your numbers on your term, but I don't want to switch my screen because if not, we
No,
can't see
no.
Wes.
No,
Yeah.
No,
it's fine.
Some things
okay.
in the future we can put on the website.
yeah,
Appointed term ends.
So Chair Cross,
yes.
item 5. Consider recommendation on the board. I'm happy to intro this if you'd like.
Where, no, I was reading through this last night. What page is that on? I'm going through my electronic copy.
We probably want to get this first after the memo after the election.
Oh, yeah, page 12,
Page 12.
provide direction on the next step on affordable housing.
Okay, is this the Word document?
It is technically a PDF that was sent.
It's not in here, right?
It is in there.
It is in here.
Yep. And unfortunately, I don't have page numbers on these.
Oh, yeah.
You want this?
I might need that. unless
I
it's-
can share it.
You show me where we are.
To this page.
Yeah, that's the memo first.
Yeah, to the agenda items for discussion. I think we'll be.
There's no page numbers on the PDF when you look at it on the website. unfortunately. You might have.
Oh, yeah,
In the
there is.
PDF top, is there a page number?
Yeah, if you go to the header, but at the bottom, there's not. In the ribbon.
No, because it comes up as the
Oh,
website.
see, I always export mine as a PDF.
Oh, okay,
Otherwise, it doesn't work, yeah.
okay,
I guess,
You're right.
yeah. And,
so it appears that it's the third to last page.
Rebecca, can you just go over your memo, the first part of your memo here? Just remind everyone about the sessions that we did,
Happy to.
where we're
So
at
brief
right now.
recap, March 15th of 2021, the village board approved the extension of TID 1 for purposes of affordable housing. And on June 4th, the CDA agreed to start educating the membership of this group and then the community at large regarding the regional issues associated with affordable housing through a series of educational presentations. So we started over the course within the last 12 months of each different sessions, and those I won't go through in order, but we started in July of 2021, and then every month or every other month had partnered with different agencies or organizations so that we could educate ourselves in affordable housing, learn of different strategies other groups are using in their areas, and then that brings us forward to we have 8 in total that concluded in February of 2022. So the purpose of this item today is really in the memo to distill what we gleaned from that process. And then in the conclusion of the memo, there's a suggestion for your consideration or another route to have staff then come back after whittling down some of these areas that we've looked at to come back and provide some more specific alternatives in a more focused area. So again, the CDA was requested to provide a recommendation to the board on how to utilize TID 1 extension funds for affordable housing. During that process, the CDA acknowledged that the village isn't able to act as a loan agent or program administrator with current staff and the limited administrative capacity. We also explored other organizations and paying other organizations to implement and manage these types of programs. But those would also cause fees to be spent on administration and then further reduces the pot of funds to be put towards the purposes of affordable housing. Over the last year, we educated members. We need to proceed towards identifying what affordable housing strategies this group would like to explore, if any, that are agreeable to the CDA as an advisory group to the board. So then the bullet points here kind of identify a highlight of key findings. We heard memos or requests from the CDA who desired to review models that could assist them in determining their next steps. So there was a request for us to seek out other organizations who have gone through this and what tools they've used in order to discern how to use affordable housing funds. Milwaukee County shared that they're members of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, and have utilized their tools as a strategy for implementing equity and affordable housing strategies in their own communities. It's also been one of the #1 tools utilized by some of our larger cities who have already embarked on this trail at a larger scale. GARE developed a racial equity toolkit, which is hyperlinked within the scope of the packet. That's a tool that other organizations and communities have used. We had a meeting with the Milwaukee County Development Alliance, which was already in process of utilizing the GARE process to determine affordable housing goals and an action plan. So if you will recall, they took the GARE process, and when we met with them, they were already, I want to say about 4 steps in over the course of a year that they were utilizing that process in order to whittle down what their goal was and then their strategies for implementing that goal for affordable housing. They eventually adopted a goal of a quality home for every Milwaukeean, creating 32,000 to 40,000 affordable housing units for Black and Latino families, making $7.25 to $15 an hour. So that's, as they went through their GARE process, that was their specific goal. And then there were 4 areas identified in their action plan: homeowner offense, homeowner defense, rental offense, and rental defense, which I also just kind of included in a detachment because I'm more visual. So their group, so their group worked through some of those different strategies and how they would apply. As the staff reflected, and as many of you as members reflected, and we reflected with the 8 different groups who we brought in to educate on affordable housing, because in between those sessions, there was preparatory time of explaining to them what our issues are, what our capacity is, and then a back end of reviewing with them how the presentation went, and then seeking advisement from them. We determined that rental staff, and sifting through that information, determined that rental office action plan appeared to fall within our existing capacity. So strategies associated with that may include creation of new affordable housing units through incentives provided to developers. They may also include designating funds to allocate affordable housing units within existing multifamily buildings. While existing buildings may not actually add affordable units to our housing stock, because the older units are likely already naturally affordable within the scope of our community, this option may also guarantee that residents living in those units would qualify for affordable housing. And that's something that we also gleaned from the housing study that we took a look at. The housing study came back and said, listen, your housing stock, you actually do have affordable housing within your community. It's just the people living in that housing wouldn't qualify within the definition of affordable.
It might not, but we don't even know.
Right, but
We
they
don't know how many people
Correct.
living in our existing affordable housing might actually meet the criteria, because it's not tracked, right? I think that's what we kind of came up with.
There were some, and I apologize, I don't have the report in front of me, but they did try to discern from some census data. But to your point,
I mean,
right.
individually, like a particular building,
Mhm.
no one knows.
Correct.
Unless because it's not part of any official affordable housing program. If there's 20 units, 5 people in there might meet the criteria, we just don't know
Correct.
to that granular of a level.
Right.
Yeah. So, go ahead. You want to finish?
I'll wrap up
You
for you,
wrap
and
up,
and
then
then
I
you
have
can
a
take it
couple.
away, Chair Frost.
I'm not taking anything away today. I'm happy that this is a group effort today.
Yeah, okay. That, the village could also develop minimum standards, which may help secure 2 to 3 bedroom units if desired. For example, we heard a lot of that through the conversation and feedback. Existing property owners may or may not be willing to participate in these types of programs due to the increased management that may be necessary. But there's also options where funds may help to modernize the buildings. So some of our older multifamily housing stock wouldn't qualify for some of the state's affordable housing strategies and programs because their units itself don't meet code requirements because they're older. So again, these aren't necessarily things we have to do. They're just different things that have been mentioned within the scope and would fall under the purview of the rental office action plan. So in here, then we reflected back really on a conversation and the presentation with the Community Development Alliance when T. Whaley Smith was pretty poignant in his last slide and asked a number of questions to the CDA, really to spark our thought process. He had encouraged us, and this is also part of the GARE process, which is for us to determine our why. And then ensure that your why also matches up with the capacity that you have to deploy it. So I think the county has been the first one to say to me, I don't know how you do it for your size, right? Because we haven't had a community in Milwaukee County try to do what you're doing at this size level. So most of the models that we see are all large cities. But I think he reflected on, some different points, to help this group reflect on and then find some direction. So the chair as well can steer how your discussion begins, but I thought that it may be helpful to hear from each member if they, after the reflection period, had an opportunity to, think about what Shorewood's why would be. You're at a much different point that you were in 2021 when we first started this discussion because of the some of the information that's been shared with you and the resources that have been provided. So I can only imagine, I've been in it from a different perspective, but have definitely grown and learned. So if, we each wanted to reflect on our why, and then come back together, that may be a good place to start. If acceptable to the chair.
No, I agree. I was just thinking that it's been a while since we've been all together. We've had virtual meetings. Not a big fan of those because it's so hard to get people's, you really see where people are at and what people are thinking. But I think that's a great exercise to just quickly, if everyone wanted to give just what their gut is right now. Like we have $1.2 million, right? $2.2 million. We're not Milwaukee, we're not Chicago, we're not even Madison. What do people think is something that we can actually accomplish in the near term? And how might that look? Because I do think if we don't identify what our why is and be on the same page as a group, we're definitely not going to accomplish much because we just don't have the time and the money to take on, a huge initiative, in my opinion.
That's correct statement. There's
So-
not staffing to oversee anything.
Right, and we don't want to blow a bunch of the money on paying someone else to administer some very elaborate, complicated program, in my opinion.
Is that the how though? Is that what you're asking for or the why?
Well, it's really the why,
Okay.
It's hard
Why
to
are-
separate them, isn't it?
it is, but I think you have to identify the why before you can even get to the how. So, I know for me, in thinking about this before this meeting and even going through this whole process of attending, I didn't attend all the education sessions, but I attended some of them. I just kept coming back to the fact that we are largely a built-out community. We are largely a community that has a fair amount of affordable housing. And I see anecdotal evidence of this every day. Someone was asking me about, helping them lease their half of a duplex a couple of weeks ago. So I hopped on Facebook and was just looking at listings. And I was amazed at what you can get in Shorewood for rental rates for 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms in Shorewood are pretty darn affordable. I mean, just in general, as far as I look at it, I don't know if it needs any criteria that is official or not, but the fact that you can rent still a 3-bedroom place, half of a duplex in Shorewood I saw one for only $1,700 a month, $1,600 a month. In this current climate, that's pretty affordable. Now, can someone earning $15 an hour with 3 kids afford to live there? No. But I don't know what kind of actual resources we have to be able to make that widely available to people. And maybe we can explore some of these things, like allocating existing units But then we get into the how, the mechanics of it, and is that even gonna work? Are people even gonna participate? How do we incentivize people to participate? You know,
So
so,
for purposes of this discussion, I want to stay a little bit more high level because Bart and I are, we kind of geek out in this area. Like, once we know a direction to head in, then we can bring you back more information that we can continue to lean into. But it's not going to be efficient for anybody's time because we'll then take away time from other projects if we have to go through every single different option.
right,
Right, so we need to kind of narrow the field a bit.
I'm confused on what you're trying to get out of us. Like, why do we want affordable housing? Or why are we trying to do this? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that question on page 15 of the PDF.
Right.
You're not supposed to see it as a PDF.
There's some bullet points.
There's
on
like the whys of, what is most important to us. Like, the board voted for this because we have that option available, but our job is to really understand and say, why is it that we're trying to, is it about racial equity? Is it truly about affordable housing and economic diversity in our community? Is it about improving Milwaukee? What is our why? And I have been thinking about it. I think that the pie in the sky sort of question for me is I would love to be able to provide quality, affordable homes for every Milwaukeean, but I don't think that in our tiny little 1.5 square mile bubble that we can do that. And so I think, there already are people living in Shorewood who could benefit from quality, affordable housing. And I think an unintended consequence of that could be that if we're providing affordable housing for everyone currently living in Shorewood, or not everyone, but people who need affordable housing, that may in turn allow other people from the area to potentially afford affordable housing in Shorewood down the road. That makes sense. So, someone who may be in an affordable unit today moves out and then is sort of taken place. And I won't get into the how, because I don't know how, but this is more conceptual. That's sort of my thoughts. And I think one of the things you touched upon about the older buildings too is, is it that there are ways to help those older building owners improve their buildings, their infrastructure? I don't know. That is another thought. I own an old home, not an old building, but it's a regular maintenance. So obviously, if you're an old building, there's more maintenance. That's sort of, I think. I don't know if that answers your question of my why.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
If I may. So, and this is, you jump in if I'm incorrect, but so when you were speaking, a part of me heard what I thought was maybe, another aspect of affordable housing is workforce housing. Or through that lens, which is not necessarily at $9.25 to $5, $15 an hour. But we've been posed the question many times because when we look at our major employers here in Shorewood, they don't live in Shorewood because they can't afford to live in Shorewood. So, other developers and people who we work with have said, maybe that's something you guys want to consider. Maybe workforce housing is where you want to be to start, right? As you look at the next 10 years.
workforce housing in the sense of new construction.
that's,
I mean,
how
I know that. I thought it was like, how do I ask the how without it? Right, because that's my question. Like,
I can get there. Let's just do the why. I think my why is just its own benefit, diversity and incomes and race, and having a community where the people who bag groceries are also your neighbors, and the kids who come from outside our district to go to our schools can also live here, and so that, and we're what academics would call a resource-rich community, and that's benefit to others who live in resource-poor communities. So to have them be able to take advantage of that is a societal good, And it's also good for our community to be diverse. That's my why, I guess. And
Yeah,
because-
and I just want to say I agree with that sentiment. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of hopping on a train that's already going 100 miles per hour here. But I can tell you that when I thought through that vote, racial equity was central in my mind. And that's not to say that it's the only focus of this. And I think that you can pull a lot of levers that will get us to a racial equity component. But diversity, racial equity was something that I stressed when I made the vote. So that's kind of my why. Again, I feel like I'm really behind the ball on this because the CDA has been doing such good work on this. But if I were to distill it down, I'd say that I think that needs to be a part of our rationale moving forward.
I agree with the racial diversity, and it goes both affordable and racial. We just need more of a mix, and that I thought that was what was the whole goal behind trying to get into using housing as one of the ways to further open Sherwood to a more mixed population, whether it's living here, going to school here, working here.
So I have a question for Wesley. If you can you hear me? Is that okay? We're just speaking like this?
Generally, yes.
Okay. And it's been a while since I remember, I'm trying to remember some of these discussions, how they went. But for the racial equity part, if I remember correctly, there really isn't a mechanism for housing to have sort of an affirmative actions component directly, right?
The affordable piece.
It's just
The
the
way-
affordable piece where you put that in place and you hope that that leads to some racial equity. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think it's more of, I think you're right. It's more of an indirect relationship. I mean, I don't think I think you're right in kind of legally what we can and can't do, kind of guessing at it. But yeah, I think it's, you pull certain levers and that results in increased diversity within the village.
So by having some more affordable units, either through existing means or new development, we would want that to ultimately result in a more diverse Shorewood racially. Does that sound right? Am I saying that right? Does everyone sort of agree with that?
There was, at the one early on, I think there was a woman from the Milwaukee Fair Housing Council, and her name escapes me, but she made it sound like there's a way that you can write the parameters so that you can make it without, violating federal housing law. She never provided any examples, but she made it sound like it would be possible to write some parameters so that I was at a conference in Green Bay, and I was talking to a woman from WIDA, young white woman. She's living in affordable housing in Madison, works for the state. Okay, so when that happens, is that a success for us? I mean, I guess that's where you have to,
It's a success for that woman,
it's a
she
success for
needs
that
it.
would. She's white, she's
regardless of
educated.
her skin color, but yeah.
Is that success for affordable housing for us? Well, and I think that's what we started learning when we realized how much affordable housing we have right now, but we don't have a diverse population because those are not the people that are necessarily occupying the affordable housing, and we have a lot of affordable housing with all those older apartments.
And
So
there are a
I
lot
think
of-
that's the dilemma, right?
Yes, and then you get into the whole question of if you build it, will they come?
Right.
There's a supply and demand issue from that perspective of, does any particular minority group want to live in Shorewood? I don't know if we know that. I guess we all
Well, that's
assume
the woman
that
said
we all
that
assume that they do.
There's a lot of,
maybe.
she knew a lot of people who would love to bring their families to Shorewood for the schools. Schools.
Right.
That's, one person. I agree, I think that, I would just go for demographic diversity. To me, the important thing, if there's any way to do it, would be to help everyone
who wants a starter home in Shorewood, get a starter home in Shorewood. But I don't know if that's possible. So I guess, to have to flip from possibly helping with home ownership, which is really the best way to accumulate wealth. Yet, one thing that I was talking with Director Emanuelson, something we can do with this money is apply it toward lead lateral replacement. And I was just thinking in my mind, the village is 50% private home ownership, 50% rental. Do we have enough money? Could we do a little bit of both? If we took 25% of the 2.2 million and put it toward lead lateral replacement costs, which will go on for the next 20 years, and they're huge, would that help make a starter home more affordable for someone? It's just a thought. I don't know, could you put a means test to it? Could you say the house has to be valued at a certain amount before?
I don't think it would have any effect on the value of the house.
No, I'm just saying if you wanted to put a means test to it,
Oh.
so that a $1 million house in Shorewood, wouldn't be getting a subsidy for a lead lateral replacement, whereas a family struggling to stay in a $300,000 house in Shorewood because the taxes are so high. That would be helpful. It would also be helpful to someone trying to break into the Shorewood housing market to know that they, that part of their cost going down the road. And this is basic public safety that we're addressing. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's fairly tangential to
Yeah, I agree.
the goal. I actually believe we do need to address the whole lateral issue.
Well, that's what
But
we're
probably
required
not.
to now.
Yeah,
That game
comes
has
from a
changed.
different pile of
Right.
Yeah, but just to just reflect on Kathy's statement, so under state statute, we are required to 75% of that extension funds for purposes of affordable housing as defined by the statute. 25% can just be used to improve housing stock if that's something we so choose to do. But we haven't and so that is, we will hear this come up as we move forward for purposes of the discussion. I think for someone like me who's thinking more operationally, once we kind of understand a direction to start heading, then when we lay out those different alternatives, we can put that one on the table as well for your future review and consideration if that's something that you want to pursue or recommend to pursue.
I guess it comes down to, so that would be number 2, homeowner defense, as opposed to rental offense. Homeowner defense, the top Post-it note says fund innovative and non-traditional programs to assist homeowners with repairs.
Right.
What is the cost? Because when I was on the board, I thought the cost was like $7,000 to $10,000 for lead lateral.
Yeah.
Is
Can
that,
be.
is that still
That's
what we're
pretty
looking
typical.
at
Mhm.
for replacements? Okay. I mean, I didn't think costs went down. But I just
Yeah,
wanted to check.
well, and so everyone's very clear, so the government has now said for the first time ever, we are all, municipalities who have lead laterals are required to get them changed out. It's a game changer.
By when?
Well, we are required to start by 2024. The board is proactively starting with a program earlier because of the fact that we are going to be doing our largest infrastructure project in the southeast area of the village and tearing up a considerable amount of roadways for purposes of the CC, or the Southeast Area Combined Sewer Infrastructure Project, for those of you who are wondering what that
That's
acronym
good.
was.
I'm still working on it.
So because every time you dig into a road, the road erodes further, right? So while we're in that environment, we want to try to make as much headway as we can, because about 95% of the village has lead laterals. And that's nobody's fault. I mean, nobody's fault. It's just the way that it has been coming through the course of time.
And
So,
there's-
so lead laterals will come back, whether we want it to or not, because we'll be preparing more information to have that discussion and look at it in more detail, to Kathy's point. So it will be out there. But we would, I still am hoping perhaps to leave this meeting with some focus so that we can also narrow in on some other areas. For this one, we're suggesting the rental offense. And Kathy is correct in that lead laterals would be They don't know if we could look at this
Homeowner
rental
weekends.
office either, because a lot of these aged multifamily are also very old, so chances are
Right.
they have them as
Is
well.
there, just sorry to ask one more questions on cost of the low laterals, but if we're knowing that, like, is there any volume discount knowing that we, and starting in 2024, have to have some, like, some sort of game plan, if that makes sense, like, to replace them, do we get any discount?
Well, what other communities do, like Milwaukee, because I have properties in Milwaukee, they had a program, and I believe they had two, maybe one or two designated contractors that they negotiated rates with.
That's what we.
And
I
they
think that's what
have
Leanne
that.
is
We
doing.
have-
She's putting
We have that
together.
now.
So if you want to read the packet. I love all these people are interested in what we're working on. So on Monday, the board's gonna be reviewing new ordinance related to the lead laterals in addition to a new lead lateral program, but more information will be coming. So I would welcome an opportunity to update this group later on kind of how that comes out. But we're at the beginning of those stages.
And I would think as so many governments are gonna be mandated that all this is going to change, there's gonna be more options, there's gonna be some new ideas. I was talking with Sharon Adams over in Milwaukee, and her husband is a developer or a rehabber, and he's come up with a way for, I think it's 10,000 of property. He can then take the pipes that are within the old house after the lateral is rebuilt and de-leaded. And for $10,000, he has a system that then makes sure that no lead goes through into the houses, because that's still a problem. Old houses have lead. So I
Lead
think,
fixtures.
yeah, right. So I think all this technology hopefully will be changing as governments say, yeah, we want to do this, and we get into that business. But I just feel like the strength and the weakness that Sherwood has is all these rental properties. Half of our housing stock is rental, which is so different than almost any other community. And so to me, that would be a really positive way for us to focus our attention. And I don't,
So you would prefer to go all in on rental offense?
I mean, I like the idea too of some, splitting it, but I really feel like we're missing the boat if we don't focus on our huge stock of rental properties that are.
Keep in mind, we
mostly
don't need to
old.
make decisions on how the funds are allocated today. But we do want to try to narrow the field so that I can continue to lean into those options and come back to you.
I think if I'm hearing, based on what everyone said so far, to kind of bring this back around, it sounds like, other than Kathy's lead lateral replacement idea, we're all sort of talking about a rental offense, using these funds to give more affordable places for people who are already living in Shorewood, place to live, and maybe who want to live here, whether because they work here or they want access to the schools or other things.
It's our
I mean,
goal.
that's
you know,
ultimately,
right.
that's what I'm hearing is if we can figure out a way to do that efficiently and effectively, that's the lowest hanging fruit for us, so to speak, especially over the next, call it 2 to 5 years.
I can
Is that,
weigh in on that. I did a pretty deep dive into home ownership versus rental options. Pretty long explanation. And I'm happy to share the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint with everybody.
That
But
may not be a bad idea.
That'd be great.
okay, yeah, but the really high level point is to get to affordable, to the highest level, like the 80%, the number like that would be rental equivalent, so they can afford $1,200 or whatever it is. To translate that into home ownership, I got down to, even if you took out, we don't have a mandate to take out the property taxes from those properties, even if you provided a 100% financing at 0%, you need to get to a house that's $200,000. And there is none. And the other option is to provide actual funds. So we have 2 million. We could do how many? 6 houses, 5 houses. But then as soon as you give someone those houses and you transfer them to try to create intergenerational wealth, I agree that's a good goal. But as soon as you do that, your affordable housing program ends. They're free to sell it and make that profit. If you restrict them from selling it, then you've essentially saddled them with all the expenses of homeownership without any of that wealth generation. And there have been communities that have done it, that have given people affordable housing to buy and set like a cap on how much they can appreciate. And after 30 years, then they've been sued because the people go, look, I've been here. I've done the right thing. I've paid for this house. And I'm being discriminated against because I'm not able to cash out the way everyone else is. It's really, when you get into the weeds, it's fraud. And we do have a lot of rentals, and that is low hanging fruit. And I talked a woman named Corey from the Fair Housing Alliance, and she said, yeah, okay, great. So there's a lot of top-up funds of, like, if we could do a top-up fund to bridge the gap between what the other government entities will pay and what it costs to be here, she said she could fill places right away.
Top up fund, I don't
Yeah, what does that mean?
So if, like, not Section 8, but maybe Section 8 would pay X amount.
Rent assistance.
Rent assistance, 1,200 for a 3-bedroom, and it's 1,700. We would provide the additional 500. Or my belief would be you probably have to provide 600 or more, and security deposit, like insurance for the landlords, and get landlords to buy into that. And you'd have to incentivize them for a reason to do this.
So is it similar to what we
But
do at the Light Horse, where he, does
I don't know what the-
subsidize a number of units, and it's based on the way he did financing for it? And so there are maybe 20 units set aside, and those can only be filled by people with lower income, and then the Light Horse accepts that that's the income they'll get for that unit versus the one next door that he gets full rent for.
Is someone paying them the difference then?
No,
Easy,
or they- or
because
they-
it's
yeah,
private.
Or they got
Easy.
preferential
But that's
financing.
correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So those
To
are
have that
the
now, right. But
certain,
that's for new.
like
and-
incentivized bonds that were being offered at the time. They don't necessarily get offered now, but to Joe's point, so in any of the units that we have now, let's say the unit's 1,500, but it makes it, affordable, I'm just picking numbers out there, 900. So it's covering that gap.
For like 20 years, it's written into so as a Light Horse, it'll phase out in 20 years or something.
They do have an agreement where
Yeah,
it's
probably.
subsidized time
Fine
frame.
with it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate,
Yeah.
I'd like to see your information, but I
Sure.
trust you've done the work and you know more about it than I do. And I thought it was important to have a discussion about.
I think that's where everyone's heart goes right away, is how do we accomplish that? And it's just,
Not.
we're way up here as a community. Our housing cost is so high that you can't.
That's why
Get
the
it down to-
bottom item on homeowner defense is develop resources and policies to lessen property tax burden.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I tend to believe too, that if you can provide people who are, I know this isn't everybody that needs affordable housing, but a lot of times people are just starting out, young families, young people, they haven't quite got their footing yet. If you can give them the ability to maybe even set some money aside every month, then that gets them maybe to a goal of homeownership, maybe not in Shorewood, but somewhere. If they can actually not have to live paycheck to paycheck every single week, every single, month. I think ultimately that can provide a lot of the things that we want in this community: racial equity, economic diversity, and everything else. So I think, Rebecca, you and staff are looking for us by the end of this meeting to give you some, okay, we're not going to go to plan unit developments. We're not going to go to lead laterals. We want to figure out how to, for example, give more affordable housing options to people who live here and who might want to live here. And maybe go a step further to say that would be done through utilizing our existing housing stock somehow. Is that kind of the direction that you're looking?
That's one of those, and I don't think we have any authority to do this, but one of the other options we talked about was, I think we can recommend it to the board that the village, to that whole thing about changing the ordinances and the housing code. So that all developments going forward have to meet, either, what was that? There was like
That
a
was in
change.
the TIF policy, changing the TIF policy that
Okay,
if there was TIF,
so that
there would be.
it's
some
because you have to,
affordable
we're
component.
talking about the 50-year goals at this point, but that all development going forward must contain bare minimums.
I just think you can do that.
We
If you have
can't
a
do
tip-
that.
If you want a tip,
Yeah, I thought that
Right.
was,
right.
is that what you were talking about? What- if
Yeah,
you
but
wanted
there's also something on the board that
You
President,
cannot use it for market value housing, I believe.
The TIF.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
I could be wrong.
Okay.
there's a change in the code that they're talking about implementing that would take it from, that would prevent, because right now I have no means to prevent someone from just, as long as they fit within the code, they can develop whatever they want.
Correct.
So to change that so that they can't.
I don't think.
And we can't do anything about that, but we can make that, make that recommendation to the,
But
that's
can
one of
you
the
do
tools in our
that
toolkit.
without, like, if you don't need to borrow funds from the village.
The
How would
village
you
board
say,
can, you don't know what I'm talking about?
I don't think you can
Why don't-
legislate
and
that.
I'm happy to look into what your question is and get back to you.
Yeah, there
I
was
don't know of something off the top of my head, but
There was a. Yeah, it was a
I'll
big
definitely
deal
go back
President
to,
McKay was talking about.
Garden Ass.
Okay,
We right now, I think your question is timely because we are working on the commercial zoning code update.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so we're in the process, another great opportunity for anyone who wants to, I mean, they're really fun. I think. Well, the session should be good. So we're in the process of updating the commercial code for Oakland and Capital corridors. So, and that directly impacts a lot of things that would happen on there, but I'm capturing your question and we can respond back. So for purposes of today, if you wanted to focus on something, and I tried to kind of distill it into a paragraph, if it's acceptable to you, right? This is just us reflecting on what we've heard, listening, and then kind of distilling down. That to recommend that the board consider the rental offense action approach for affordable housing that may include adding additional affordable units or modifying existing multi-unit housing stock to become affordable units as viable options. And request that the CDA review specific action plans or strategies associated with the rental offense approach, and then provide a recommendation after reviewing those back to the village board. So essentially what I want to do is we need to check it, right? It's been a year. And more importantly, I want to check in with the village board, because if they get this and say, nope, I'm out, I don't want to look at rental, then I don't want to spend that time, because
Yeah.
time is not infinite, right? I want to pivot and go to allocate resources from our end in a direction that people want to focus on.
Is there any interest in a hybrid approach that would also include assisting homeowners with repairs under the homeowner defense?
Yeah, I
instead of
think
putting it
that,
all rental offense.
I think because, so lead lateral, and I keep reflecting back on the
And it
fact
wouldn't have
that
to be
lead
lead laterals. I'm just
right, but
saying.
if it works, I mean, I think it's gonna come up for purposes of discussion. So I think regardless of whatever approach you take, you're gonna be hearing from us all over the place about lead laterals, because we don't have a choice. This is what the requirements are now. So you're gonna hear it as a resident in our community. You're gonna hear about it through a number of different ways. So I think we're gonna have to pull that out for the board to say, board, you have 25% if you so desire to use on that portion. They could just choose to do that. I think our job, and that's why
25% of the.
2.2.
the
2.2,
okay.
right? So they can do that, but our job is to kind of look at those. I mean, so if they want to do that, you can as a board member, but then we're still left with needing to review those rental offense strategies to say, okay, what do we do with that other 75%?
I would like to throw out that I think it's been a year. I would like to make some progress on this, and I feel like if we don't start making some decisions, we are never going to make progress on this. And I would like to suggest that the group, along with Rebecca, really consider sending this over to the board with the rental offense as the direction that we want to pursue. Because then we can start actually getting into the weeds a little bit about what is available, how these mechanisms and mechanics might actually work, so that we can figure out if we can do anything. You know, that's ultimately what we need to do here. We need to pick a direction, and then we need to start figuring out within that direction, can we get something to work?
Especially since, you know, you had that conversation with the person that we don't know the name yet, that said there is a way
Correct.
that you can get targeted people into affordable units and not just have them be available to everybody. And I think that was always our, you know, our stumbling block, how to get people that really need affordable housing into our
Right, and
affordable
that's-
housing.
and that's one of the
there are some
mechanisms.
Ways that we can find
Yeah,
out how to do that.
that's one of the things that now, if we pick a direction, we can start going, we can start looking
Right.
into that. and
Yeah.
figuring that out.
My thought on that was almost to put out like a quasi RFP to nonprofits that already engage in this work. Like, you know, we have funds. Give us a proposal, how you think you could use these, and then we can have something to evaluate by experts who are already doing this on the ground, and they say, you know, that's where I got the idea for the top up fund. It was like, yeah, this is, if you do these three things, I can fill those apartments today, okay? That gives us some, at least gives us something to work with.
Without being sued for
Yeah, right,
discrimination.
Right.
Right.
So we don't end money.
Always paramount.
And we don't have to redo the work, we don't have to redo the work in our own heads as amateurs that people who make a living doing this are already doing, and that we would need to partner with anyways. I think that's the.
Right,
So there's no appetite for a hybrid approach.
not from my perspective, I don't think.
The
Not
board
right
can
now.
always choose a hybrid approach if that's what they want to do.
I-
But for
I'd
this
like to
group,
know
I
at
don't
this
know.
level. if
Oh,
there's
at this
any-
level.
At this
Okay,
level, I
got
just
it.
would like to know if there's any appetite for a hybrid approach.
I mean, I guess that is, my question is, like, is the hybrid approach just for lead laterals, or is it for any, like,
No.
I mean, I guess the question, without getting into how, you know,
Right.
they're, you know, think about like sidewalk repairs, like, you
Streetlights.
potentially could have, you know, $1,000 bill to repair your sidewalk, if it's, you know, if you're on a corner or whatever. You know, lead laterals, there are some things that I think are beyond the typical homeowner expense, that just happen. And I, you know, but I guess my question, and it's the how, and I know that we're not there yet, but like, how do you do, like, it would it be 20, because you said 25% you could potentially do, and then another 75% would go to affordable housing. I do see value in that. You know, I think of, you know, people who want to age in their home and are on a fixed income. You know, they need their sidewalk to be fixed, or they need their, you know, I don't know. I do think that there's value in.
I see what you're saying, but what, to me, we need to keep paramount in our mind is if our ultimate goal is demographic diversity, how, you know, how's the best way to use that money to get to demographic diversity? Fixing sidewalks and streetlights are all great, and that's going to lead to community stability. But demographic diversity is, as you know, needs some specific programs to try to move us in that direction.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of how
laterals
I
and,
feel.
yeah, laterals and all those others are going to help us in general, but that one goal of demographic diversity, which I like the way you said that, was
And
to me.
I think of, you know, an elderly person who wants to stay in their house also does provide some demographic diversity. You know,
True.
so, I mean,
So
I
maybe
see
really
that,
need racial.
I guess I missed the vote on something. So the cost of individual lateral repairs is gonna be levied back on the homeowner?
Yeah.
Not picked up by the village.
Only to the curb stop.
So we're
Where the-
in
So that's,
process.
so they're saying across the board, everyone's gonna pay $7,000 to have their, or
Average.
10,000.
Uh,
The village isn't picking that up.
We're working
Oh,
on,
that's
we're
right.
working on funding plans.
Oh, well, then we'll set aside a pot of money for people who meet an income requirement or fall below an income requirement could access those funds to help pay for those. Then that would automatically
Is there-
be
is
only
there a
usable
pot
by
of money?
low income.
But
No, I'm
there's
saying
no
of
pot of
our
money.
2.2.
Oh, that's,
rather than just university send 25% out across the board to every,
oh, yeah, that's,
so that,
that's,
you know,
what I-
rich
that's,
people.
right.
Right, that's why I
That's
said
what I
maybe
think
there
what
could be a
happened
means
is-
test. If your
right.
house
Oh,
is
means.
worth less than,
Right.
if your
But
house
like-
is assessed at less than 500,000 or 300,000, here's the pot of money. Can you do that legally? I don't know.
What we were saying was that we are able to set aside or hold 25% of those.
That's what I got.
2.2 funds, so,
To improve housing.
to improve housing stuff.
That
right?
doesn't necessarily. Oh, that's
But
great.
they're a tough group to get a word in edgewise with. So,
You just gotta yell.
I'm not looking that way, sorry.
It's a robust discussion, which is good.
so I mean, my thought, kind of this being my first meeting on this, my thought is it goes back to, I think, a point John made earlier on, which is, we're not going to boil the ocean here. The question is, for me, and what I'm struggling with is, do we pick one thing and do it really, really well, or try to do a bunch of different things? And I kind of lean towards, going all in on one thing rather than trying to do several different things and doing them all doing them all not to the extent that we'd like to do it. So, I mean, my gut feeling is just to really focus on one thing, like rental offense. So that would be my lean, the way I think through this.
That I would agree with Wesley. That's kind of what he said it much better than I did, but that is what I'm trying to propose is if we had $20 million, this is a different discussion. We have $2.2 million.
Yeah.
It is not a lot of money. So there are a lot of challenges that the village is going to be going up against in the next 5 to 10 years. But if we really want to get the most bang for this 2.2 million bucks, I think the narrower we can make this focus, the better. And even when we get into the how of rental offense, probably the narrower the focus, the better. Because there are 10 different things we could do within rental offense, that we could try to use this money for. But ultimately, whether it's giving, people who qualify an extra $600 or $800, that is the one thing that we do, and we do that for 10 years with this $2.2 million. That to me, ultimately, is, because I know for me personally, if I try to take on too much, I don't do well with it. And we all have limited capacity and limited time. Staff has limited capacity, limited time, and we've got 100 other important issues that this village needs to address over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why I feel pretty strongly that it would be good for us to say to pass along to the board, but we really think we should focus on this. And my why is, and really coming back around to this rental offense. If this is what we're trying to accomplish, if we're trying to get racial and economic diversity newly developed in our community, the best way to use these funds, I believe, is to focus on creating some affordable rental units in this community that we don't really have. Additional, right? Official additional
Subsidized.
units, because we don't have
Love the
any,
writer in
or we don't have right. Yes. So
We got plenty of units, they just aren't.
At this point, they're not subsidized,
Right.
except the light horse, well, in
Right.
section 8. But there are 13 families, I believe, that are getting, in one of those presentations, 13 families in Shorewood are getting a county subsidy, I believe.
yeah.
But that's not a big number.
No.
And ultimately, I mean, not just to play devil's advocate here too, we also need to pick a direction to see if anything is going to even work. Because we may pick this direction.
I was right there, I was
We
thinking,
may pick this
Maybe that was
direction
thinking.
and we put the word out and not a single landlord.
what, zero landlords to go for it.
Because
Right.
what we do, we want it to be measurable, that we can go back to the board and say, yes, we said this, and here's year 1 progress, year 3 progress, and.
Because I know as a landlord,
Yep.
both of us are landlords. I don't know if any other people at
In
the
Shorewood?
table are landlords. I do not own any rental units in Shorewood anymore, but
Is
they're
Joe-
directly
No.
adjacent.
Milwaukee.
It's not going to be easy to get landlords on board with this program.
Correct.
This is not
You
gonna
have
be
to
a
go
slam dunk. This
above
is not
and-
gonna be like, we're gonna have people lining up, they're like, oh, this is a great idea, like, show me the money.
There
I'd be
might
happy
be
to
a
show up.
few who, out of the good of their heart, but.
And you're gonna
mostly
have to make it worth their while,
gonna-
because you don't have to.
But maybe not necessarily. If we currently have landlords that are getting affordable rents for their properties, but they don't have affordable people in those properties, then it's not gonna be, if we can help them see how we can move affordable people into affordable units instead of, students or whoever is occupying them now, then
True.
they don't have a loss of money and we have a gain in diversity, and
But what you have on their side is more bureaucracy.
it's also true.
Yeah,
And-
sec-
And
right.
ultimately, as a
Right.
landlord, what I don't need is more
They
bureaucracy.
send,
And plus they have a renter there who is stable.
Exactly,
And-
right.
So how do you get them out?
If we had a bunch of empty units, or we had properties that were in severe disrepair, and we were offering them an incentive to get them fixed up.
Correct.
And then, but that's the tricky part about this is,
Yeah.
we don't really have we don't have a bad housing situation at all on average in the village.
Right.
So it's not like we have these little pockets where we can go target these little programs and say, this is gonna work, this is really gonna help you out, landlord. They're gonna have to wanna do it out of the goodness of their heart. I hate to say it that way, but that's ultimately.
or we have to incentivize them. Yeah, because one of the things is for those Section 8, they send an inspector through every year. And it's sort of well known that their job is just to nitpick you and find, because otherwise they didn't do their job, so find something. I remember one time there was an old radiator hole this big in the corner of one of my units. He's like, that's a trip hazard. I'm like, over it, so I replaced, and I was like, it was, but so no landlord's gonna want to deal with an inspector coming through once a year. I mean, so you have to make it worth their while.
Sure.
So that's why, again, I really feel like if we can, as a group, come together and just try to go down a road, see if this works. If it does, great, we can develop some programs. If it doesn't, let's find out quickly if it doesn't, so that we can switch gears and go another direction. Because ultimately, I would like to get something done soon. We've been talking about this for over a year, and every month, every year we go that we're not doing something is a time we're not using this
Rents are
funds,
going
and
up.
rents are going up
By the month.
and it's getting less and less affordable to live everywhere,
Rapidly.
especially in the village. So that's my 2 cents.
So it's a great segue, I guess, to here, which is why we want to check in. If there's a recommendation coming from this group, we want to have that coming to the board so that we check in with the board. Because I want to make sure that if you go off in these directions, that you have a group, everyone needs communication. We also have a new board composition, and so a part of this really for everyone is we want to take everyone on the journey together with us so that everyone understands what we're doing, why we're doing it. And that way, if we do find out that things don't work, we can share that information, right? Because we all know that there's so many options out there. So distilling back down to, I'm here to take that, whatever recommendation you have, or if you're ready to make one, as this next step.
Let's revisit this possible motion
Okay.
that staff put together. Does everyone have that in front of them?
No, where?
I'll read it to you.
Yep.
So the possible motion that staff put together is, I recommend the village board consider 1, a rental offense action approach for affordable housing that may include adding additional affordable units and or modifying existing multi-unit housing stock to become affordable units are viable options. And 2, request the CDA to review specific action plans for the rental offense approach, providing the recommendation to the village board. Is there any discussion on that? Any modifications that anyone would like to make?
I just have just a point of information question as someone who is not familiar with the industry. What would this signal to a developer? Anything that I should be aware of as someone who doesn't know the industry?
This potential motion? Nothing.
Well, I didn't, sorry, she was.
Go ahead. You can read.
I can remember what I just said. COVID thought. What if I were a developer
Yeah.
and I read that this was passed by the CDA today? what would this trigger for me? Anything when I say opportunity, liability, I'm not touching this, how would I feel if I were a developer? Is this,
Nothing,
Yeah, I would say not.
no impact.
it doesn't really open the door for anyone to come in?
No, I
Maybe
kind of
it's-
would, I wouldn't mind putting an RFP out also to developers that, like, I have a few properties in mind that says, come to us and this is our goal. We want a 20% affordable housing development. Make an ask of us, you know, and that would open doors, I think, to people who are already inclined that way.
But that may be that may be
But that's-
separate from this. That,
Yeah.
that could involve a
And
This
whole
doesn't, this
nother,
doesn't send any signal to anybody except our community, which is
our
important, of
community
course,
and
but I just-
existing property owners. I mean, I think if anything,
Yeah,
it could
half
be
of
a
our owners are
possible positive that
owning
existing
properties.
owners, existing rental property owners might be interested in, you know, participating in the program if we ever get one off the ground. You know, so I don't see a negative. If that's what you're going for, I
I just
don't
want
see a negative.
transparency,
with it.
so, I just so that everybody knows, if we pass this, what could happen? Who could show up? Who would show up? Would anybody show up and say, I'm interested in this? How can I get a piece of the action?
Well, we don't.
I think kind of the
It's
the
too
sort of
vague.
a signal would more be if we were looking at the category number 4, rental defense, where we were having like sweeping policy changes for some.
Yeah, like rent control.
Acquisition to fund properties. That I think that to me would signal as a developer, like I could build here and get subsidies for it. Where we are now in that sort of offense category, to me more is supporting the current housing that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not my industry, so tell me if that's not.
No, I think that's right. I don't see, I don't see this.
It doesn't
being
really
a-
open a door right away. There's a crack.
Well,
I mean, is
not for this action at all. Maybe once the board did something with it, maybe, but I have a feeling the board may tweak this
It's-
anyway. So-
Yeah, and then where we sit, one of the things is if you look at the entire toolbox available to any community for creating affordable housing, about 75% of it doesn't apply to us.
Right.
We don't have affordable homes. We don't have tax foreclosed homes. We don't have land.
Right.
There's only about 3 developable pieces left, in the village. So I think you need to focus on those. I think that has to do with the code change to prevent someone from just coming in, if that's what we want, and just building luxury housing. So there's an argument though that
Market
then
rate.
people move up and then freeze up stuff at the bottom. But yeah, there's not a whole bunch of land and speculation out there and development opportunities that this would impact.
Yeah,
2 things come to mind. My purpose of this is really checking with the board. So it was not viewing it through a developer lens. But the board has already said and asked me to reach out to anyone who approaches us for development to say, we're
Good.
interested in affordable housing. If you develop here, we are interested in
Yeah.
having conversations with you about affordable housing, incentivized, not incentivized, whatever that is, we want to hear from you. So, I mean, we have
In
said that.
addition to and separate from this.
Right, separate from
Right,
this.
right.
So I see that when it comes to rental offense and like affordable units within development, we are already communicating that
Okay.
because that's been the ask and the direction from the board. We did that with Wimmer. Wimmer said, we are not interested in talking with you about affordable. So we heard him, tried, you gotta go back 3 times.
Right.
But, we said the
Which
same
that's
thing.
the Sun Seekers
to-
or that's the bank building?
The
Bank
bank
building.
building. We've also said that to 3 Leafs Development, and we continue to say that to them, because we know that they've been, their developments that they have proceeded on have included affordable components. And so, we continue to say it to them. I expect to hear back because we're gonna continue to try to, because that's been the direction, right? We want to hear from you if you can create affordable units.
But with the
So,
goal, if there's something fairly current, such as the Sunseeker site, would the goal be to use this money rather than creating a new TIF?
so let's say that they came forward and said, yeah, we'll maybe create affordable units. That would be something that would be,
And we got this
a
pot of
good
money.
option. But that's also for you guys to decide. And it's not, to me, as someone who gets into the weeds on it, it's not as simple. There's performer review that you do on any of that in conjunction with your public assistance policy that you have on the table, which we've not used yet, but
Right.
people have provided good feedback. Yeah.
I sense some TIF fatigue in the village. I could be alone in that, but
Yeah, I'm not
we have,
sure.
you know, we have this, it may be small to some, but it's large to others, 2.2 million.
Mhm.
It's important to see, well, it just depends on everything that comes. Every project is different. And so I
Right.
wouldn't want to make any
Yes.
blanket statements about.
Because there's, when it comes to, I think, review in my small world, when it comes to reviewing developments and whether that public assistance is appropriate or not, it's always case specific. Because they all have different financing, they all have different, they're happening in different years, they have different carrying costs, they have different, there's,
Priorities.
right, you know.
Markets.
And the CDA and the board may have different priorities at the time that particular development is happening. Right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, going forward, as interest rates go up, low interest loans might become very attractive. And
Right.
make it feasible for developers, so we could use our money that way.
As leverage.
mhm.
Because if I was doing a deal last year, it would cost me 3% of my money, and this year it's gonna cost 7%. That's a huge difference in a big development, so. That's an opportunity that's sort of becoming available.
Right. And as we said, trustee Stokebrand just sat in with, listening to us interview financial advisors. I know you're all jealous.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Did you record it?
I think that's how I caught COVID.
But, you know, every meeting we were in, there wasn't one financial advisor who said like, hey, like your policy, like it's good, but remember, every development's unique because they are. But it is good to have some, no differently than we're doing here, having some consensus and direction in terms of being on the same page of where we're going. And that's what is spurring me to do this check-in with the board.
Yep. All right. I'd like to move forward.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any discussion or thoughts on either positive or negative?
You want us to vote on sending
I-
this recommendation?
I
to the board?
would love it if
I'll
someone, if we
move
felt
approval.
comfortable to move that. So you want to move
I motion that we approve that.
as written?
I think so, except there's one sort of grammatical loophole.
Yeah, isn't the R viable?
Yeah,
Yeah. That was bothering me too, thank you.
Now you've got the booking.
it should be as, right? So long of a sentence.
It is long, Joe, so if you want to shorten it, well.
Yeah.
As viable options. Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
as.
so
I-
you're moving with that minor.
I'm
change.
moving,
Right?
my sum total, participation is to suggest that we change the R to
Okay,
as.
will you second my motion?
Affordable housing solved. I second the motion. Or was there a motion? Okay, I second that motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mike, were you did you move?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mike moved,
Joe.
Joe second, unanimous. Aye.
Discussion.
Oh,
Oh,
Hearing none.
no more discussion, sorry.
Okay. Moving on, included in the, well, I sent this out to you actually yesterday. That was my segue into financial advisor.
Yes, I noticed that.
So we interviewed with 4 proposals that were submitted, 4 were reviewed and interviewed. And the recommendation coming forward to you today is Baker Tilly. However, it is without the team that was working with us the last time. The team that was with us the last time was based out of Minnesota. And so the team that we interviewed with and who'd be working with us directly would be a person in Milwaukee and a person in Madison. And I've had additional follow-up conversation with them, and it didn't conclude because of the holiday and then people staggering and COVID, because that has impacted people. Oh, okay. Now that I'm thinking about it, so yes, yeah. So we had some people out, but concluded those conversations yesterday to ensure clarifications on the proposal. And so the recommendation coming forth is to continue with Baker Tilly, but with the change out of who we were working with before to who we're working with now in their proposal. And so the reason why this is coming to you for action is because 3 years ago, I had said to both groups, hey, it doesn't make sense to work with different financial advisors because you all have to be on the same page regardless. And it's more administrative and cost burdensome to us. So working with the same group would be good. The contract holder would be the village board as signing agents. So this recommendation is slated to come to them on Monday. The component I'm waiting for is whether you agree with that recommendation. And if so, I'm looking to hear a motion from this group to move forward with Baker Tilly.
Can I just have one quick question about that? So assuming, if we approve this and the board doesn't approve Baker Tilly, are you going
Then
back
coming back
to?
to-
Okay. So this is really just to ensure that the board and CA are using the same financial advisor, and you were on that committee for the RFP? Okay.
And at the time and during the transition, because we let this RFP at the beginning of March and we had recognized we weren't meeting, Kathy was kind to sit in and review those proposals with us and sit in with interviews, representing both the hat of member of the CDA and then also member of the board.
Okay.
I move to approve Baker Tilly as the financial advisor for the CDA.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
I,
Aye. Okay,
Then included within your packet is just the quarterly financial report, which has very little change from the last time we saw it. We haven't expended funds other than administrative expense incurred with audit. And that concludes any report here. Which takes into item 8. Which is adjourned. Oh, there you go. It's like, who's gonna read
I
that?
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Wes, thank you so much for taking the time for joining us.
Thanks, Wes.
Yes.
For that,
Sure.
Congratulations, Chair and
go get some crab cakes.